what makes you special. What do you bring to the table that will really enhance your ability to do the job very well and be successful? As I already said, it introduces yourself. It usually is that first introduction. It's very possible. Now, I would argue as a career professional that hopefully you're doing some networking, regardless of whether you want to go into academia or industry. Hopefully you're doing some networking, and in an ideal world, the resume or the CV is not the first time they've heard of you. Maybe they've already heard of you in some other way at a conference, etc. But typically, a lot of times it is the first time they've heard of you, and it's your way to introduce yourself to those professionals. And then, of course, shows that you're serious, qualified, understand the role, understand the position, and how you fit into it. So it shows that you're that serious and qualified candidate they want to look at more closely in an interview situation. By the way, I should probably stop and say I am not formal in my presentation style at all, whether it's Zoom, in person, using PowerPoint, not using PowerPoint. Please, please, please feel free to just unmute yourself and interrupt me if you have a question, or type a question in the chat box. I have no problem stopping for a moment. I think we should have plenty of time to get through what we need to get through. So please stop me if you have any questions. So how do you successfully market yourself? Whether it's a resume, whether it's an interview, a networking event, regardless of what the format is where you're communicating why you'd be a great fit, there are some key elements to doing that successfully. And so you first want to know yourself. Know what skills and qualifications you do have. Sometimes that comes with just a little bit of experience. You know, you've now been through your undergrad experience, maybe you even have some work experience. You've got your graduate school experience to pull from. I would always suggest that regardless of where you are in your professional career, that you look for ways to test yourself and push yourself. So now that you're in your graduate career, what other things can you do? What can you take on? Projects, research, maybe committees, to really push yourself, to know yourself more, to know where those strengths are and where it is that you need a little bit of work. So you really do have to show that maturity of understanding who you are. You, of course, then have to know your audience, just like any person trying to communicate something to an audience. You have to know who it is. I'm not going to say the same things in front of one audience that I am the other. It doesn't mean I'm not being authentic. It just means I'm making sure that I am talking about what they need to know to make a decision. Excuse me. And so then, of course, the two pieces, connecting those two pieces together and really understand what is it that I have, what is it they want, and where do they overlap. And that's your sweet spot. That's where you want to focus, whether it's your resume, the conversations you're having in a networking environment, and of course the interview as well. That's where that's your sweet spot to hit. All right, so this is not the prettiest of slides, but hopefully it gets the point across a little bit, because one of the things that you should understand is the difference between a curriculum vitae and a resume. And there are differences. I have noticed that sometimes in academia and sometimes even outside of academia, folks will use these two words interchangeably, and they're not. They actually are different documents, but there of course are some similarities. And so on the left-hand side there, you've got your CV, and it's a comprehensive, really comprehensive biographical statement that summarizes everything that you would need to, that you'd want to get across to an academic professional. So of course your education, research that you are a part of, teaching that you've done, publications, presentations, really just about everything that you've done as a professional and in your education. It's used when applying to, of course, positions in academia, but also fellowships and grants as well. And they specifically will ask for a curriculum vitae versus a resume in those cases. And even if they did say resume and as an academic, they probably mean CV. The format is going to vary depending on your experiences. And part of that is because that last point, there isn't a set length, typically 2 to 3 pages for maybe a new PhD, depending on how much work experience you've had coming into your graduate school experience. but there really isn't a limit. So when I've worked with Dr. 80s, I don't come from an academic background, I come from a corporate background. And so talking with her has been really fascinating because she's coming from academia. And I did get to see a glimpse of her relatively updated curriculum vitae, and it's, I want to say dozens. I don't think dozens of pages is overstating it. It was dozens of pages long. And she's also been in her field for quite some time. She's experienced, but in other words, there isn't a limit to what that document is going to look like. Resume is very different in that sense. It's still going to be a summary of that relevant stuff that the employer needs to know about you to make a decision as to whether or not to hire you, but to bring you in for that next phase, that interview. But it's going to be a little bit more abbreviated, a lot more abbreviated in some cases. Education, related work experience, maybe some additional work experience, depending on how relevant it is. It's typically used for business, nonprofit, industry jobs. I'm specifically not including, by the way, government work, because applying to at least the federal government, we could do an entire workshop just on how different that process is alone. The resume, everything is just very different. But pretty much everything else outside of academia, a resume would apply to. There are formats. We're not going to go into the different formats today: chronological, functional, and combination. Most often what you've seen is a chronological resume, or in many cases, a reverse chronological resume. That's typically what you've probably seen. Functional is a somewhat of a different beast, and it's used in very specific circumstances, which I won't go into today. But one of the biggest differences is that limit. So typically a page, maybe two, for students and recent grads. I would say a page for certainly undergraduates. But those of you who are pursuing that graduate degree, and again, depending on how much work experience you may have had before, 2 pages is reasonable, I would say. I don't think you have to stick to the 1 page, but again, it's abbreviated. It's much more abbreviated. And it really emphasizes specific skill sets. That's how you kind of are able to tailor or shrink that beast of a CV down to just a couple of pages for the resume. Whoops. Okay, here we go. So the important elements of a resume, and we're going to go through the sections of a resume, but these are some of the important elements that you should be aware of. And I would say this also, to some extent, to a large extent, applies to a CV as well. But with the exception of maybe that last one at the bottom there. So it needs to be clear, which sounds, all these are going to sound somewhat silly, because you're going to probably say, well, of course it should be clear and organized and et cetera, et cetera. But it should be clear. And part of understanding whether or not that's clear is getting other eyeballs on that resume. And again, we'll talk about where you can go to get some additional assistance. And so, for example, I will give you a great example of something that is not clear. I've learned a lot from my own mistakes, and hopefully passing on that wisdom is helpful. I started a graduate degree a long time ago and didn't complete it. Did so many credits towards that graduate degree. And on my resume at one point, I was applying for a job that is one of these preferred graduate degree. I didn't have my graduate degree at that point. And I was applying to a job that said preferred, graduate degree to preferred. Okay, so I applied, got an interview. And the very last question that was asked in that interview was, we just want to make sure that we're clear here. You have your master's degree, correct? And I paused, I said, no. And I looked back at my resume. They were very gracious about it. So not everybody will be as gracious, but I looked back at my resume and I didn't have a graduation date. I did have the title of the master's degree, and I had something like X number of credits towards this degree. But that wasn't obviously clear to them. And so they, like I said, they were really gracious about it. The person who was interviewing me said, oh, now I see it on your resume. I'm sorry, now I understand. But that's on me a little bit too, because obviously it wasn't clear as it could be. And you run the risk, of course, of somebody being not as gracious and being kind of annoyed. And so making sure that you get another set of eyeballs on it so somebody can say, this doesn't make sense. Obviously, it has to be organized in a way that makes sense from the employer's perspective, always coming from the employer's perspective. Consistent. If I'm writing out the full name of the month on one entry, I'm writing out the full name of the month on another entry. I'm not abbreviating or changing it to 01 instead of January. So consistent formatting all the way throughout. Obviously error-free, and that also helps with getting another set of eyes on there. Visually appealing. I will tell you that when I am looking at a resume, reviewing a resume for somebody, that is one of the first things I do. I don't actually read the content, look at the words or anything like that. I'm just looking at the thing and saying, does this give me a migraine to look at? Is it so jam-packed that I can't even read it? Or does it look a little empty and like there's all kinds of space all the way around? Or, you know, is the formatting kind of funny and I won't be able to make sense of the actual content when I start to dig in? So it's visually appealing. Now, obviously that's a little bit subjective, but again, that's something that you're going to look at and make sure that it is organized in such a way that is pleasing to the eye. Again, that's where getting some help will be beneficial. And then this is the thing that's a little bit different, I think, from the CV. The resume needs to be relevant. Well, everything should be relevant, but relevant and results driven. And so you're not just going to put everything on there. So if you do choose to have a publications section on your resume, maybe it's not all of your publications. Maybe it's relevant publications, the ones that are directly relevant to that job. Because it could be a research position in industry. Research can still be important. Publications, the fact that you are published can still be important. But do we need all 85 of your publications? Maybe we just need the ones on there that are going to be directly relevant to that job. And then results oriented, skills oriented, making sure that things are, folks can understand what you did here and how, you know, what the outcome was and how you were either successful or what you've learned from, you know, that particular item, the skill you developed, that sort of thing. So here are some of the examples of resume sections. A word of caution, and we'll get into this a little bit. Not everything on here is something you need on your resume. I think the education is definitely something you're going to want. The experience, yes, but other things it's a little bit more, depends on the situation, depends on your experience, of course, and also depends on the job. You do not need to have references on your resume. You don't need to have references available upon request at the bottom of your resume. Folks know if they want your references, they'll ask you for them. What I do like to do though, is I like to take the top of my resume, so that my name and contact information. I like to take that section and put it in a new document. It almost creates kind of like a letterhead for myself and create a whole new document with reference lists. Again, you don't have to necessarily turn that in until it's been asked, but that's kind of a nice touch. Based on, it should be ordered based on importance. So we'll talk a little bit about that when we get to the experience section, I think, but just know that the further up you go on the resume, the more important or the more relevant it probably is. I had a colleague years ago who described the top of the resume as the beach, and houses that are on the beach are much higher priced, much higher valued than houses 4 miles away from the beach, right? And so that's how you want to think of that experience towards the top, or the sections towards the top of the page. The closer they are to the beach, the more highly valued they are. Much more selective in content than a CV, and we'll talk about that as well. So you only have a few pages. So you've got to be, depending on how much experience you have, you're going to have to be a lot more selective as to what goes on. And what goes on might change from position to position. Even if they're very similar positions that you're applying for, but maybe at different companies, different organizations, that information, even the order, sometimes might change a little bit depending on that job. So let's take a look at what this might look like. And you know what? I'm realizing now that I don't specifically have anything on contact information, the stuff that you put at the top. But what we're typically looking for today is obviously your name. And by name, I mean how you like to be addressed. And so I know sometimes that's different than maybe a legal name, but that's what you're going to be called. If your name is Leslie Jackson at the top, they're going to call you Leslie Jackson. And so feel free to make sure that is the way that you want it to look. I have also seen students who might, put in parentheses, like my name is Leslie, but let's say I go by my middle name of Ann. And so maybe, Ann Jackson is the name, but in parentheses over here, it says Leslie because, in case they were looking up other documents that had my legal name, they wouldn't get confused, that sort of thing. And then your phone number and email address where you can be contacted. You have a professional voicemail set up, a professional looking email address. Beyond that, you could also put like a LinkedIn profile or portfolio or something like that. But beyond that, you don't absolutely need to have an address. I know a mailing address is something that's been traditional on a resume. You don't absolutely have to have that because not really anything is going to be mailed to you at this point. Everything is going to be through email, electronic means. They're going to call you probably to set up an interview in theory. So, the mailing address is kind of questionable. The times that I would suggest having the mailing address is maybe the position you're applying for is in Philadelphia. Maybe your home is in Philadelphia and you want to put that home address. To just signal to them that moving to Philadelphia from State College is not a big deal for you. You know the area, it's familiar. So that might be a reason. Okay, back to your education section. So this is how you would set it up. You'd have your degree. Now you could have the Pennsylvania State University first and your degree second. It's really kind of up to you and what you want to emphasize. You would also have your anticipated graduation date and make sure it does say anticipated or expected so that, again, you're crystal clear that you have not graduated yet, in case I don't know what year it is and skip over that part. And do the best you can there. I know sometimes that might change. So good faith effort as far as what the year of your graduation or the time of the graduation would be. You are, as you're, putting on your doctorate here, you might again, have your dissertation title, especially if it's relevant to whatever the job is that you're applying for. You might also have your advisor's name, whoever it might be. And then you'd set up your master's degree and your bachelor's degree in the same way. Now, you may not have a dissertation or thesis for your bachelor's, so don't worry about that part of it. And you don't necessarily need to have your advisor's name for your bachelor's degree. But for the most part, it's set up in a very, very similar way for your master's and your bachelor's degree. It's in reverse chronological order. So the most recent degree, the one you're working on, would show up first, followed by the next recent one, and then the next recent one. You do not need to have your high school diploma on there at this point. I'm just going to stop there to see if there are any questions before I go further. Okay. Oh, it's a second too soon for me to say okay. Let's see here. Oh. I can't seem to pull up. I don't know why it's not letting me see the chat here. Whoever it is, would you mind unmuting and asking the question? I can't seem to see the chat box. Don't know why.
I think that chat was just Stacy telling us we could unmute or type in the chat.
Yep,
or
it was.
if that person is unable, if anybody else wouldn't mind unmuting and reading the question for me.
Yep, it was me, Trevor. Thank you. Let's see.
Oh, wait a minute.
So, Leslie, you're good.
I'm good. Okay. I'm going to go ahead then. Thank you for the thumbs up.
Using hand signals.
Okay. So let's move on here. So the essential content in the resume that you're going to pull from the CV, your education and your relevant experience. The other stuff is optional. And I would say objective is optional for resumes regardless. It's not always the best. It's not always the greatest thing to start your resume with an objective. They're usually kind of boring in my experience. But qualifications and skills sections that may or may not even, that may not make sense for the job you're applying to. Academic projects, relevant coursework, honors and awards, travel, research, publications, posters, all of these things are really optional. The best thing to do is try and think like the employer. Put yourself in their shoes as much as you possibly can and try to determine whether or not these things make sense to keep on the resume. You're trying to create a narrative. You're trying to create a story about why you'd be a qualified candidate and entice them to bring you in to learn more. You're not putting everything you've done on your resume. You're not even fully explaining everything that you've done on your resume. You're trying to entice them to say, wow, this is a qualified person. I can't wait to learn more about this project that they've been a part of. So not all of these things are necessary to put on a resume, but you might have all of them on your CV. So the name of the game is transferable skills. This is probably one of the most important concepts that you can really understand to putting together a great resume. This idea that you're developing a skill in one area and then applying it to another. So some years ago, I was working, before I was the student outreach coordinator at Penn State Career Services, I was a career counselor. And I had a student who I was working with, a graduate student who was, all throughout her graduate career on track to go into academia. And then right at the end decided, oh, not for me. I want to go in a different direction. And so she was really struggling with how to do this, how to translate her experience from the CV to the resume and, even talking in person, et cetera. And so I encouraged her to look at that, one of the job descriptions that she was interested in. And it said, oh, I wish I could remember the exact way it was phrased, but it said something like excellent, let's say it said excellent written communication skills. And I said, what in your background do you have that demonstrates excellent written communication? She's like, oh, I don't know. I can't think of anything. I can't think of anything that's relevant. An email maybe? And I said, yeah, email is definitely a part of it. It's a form of written communication, but there's something else much bigger that you've worked on. Your dissertation, for example. And, we were kind of going through all of those things, and then it started to click for her. Oh yeah. And I'm going to show you another slide here coming up to really kind of lay all that out, but it's a different environment, yes, but a lot of these skills are things that you can apply from your academic environment to the industry. And you might talk about them in a little bit of a different way than maybe you would in an academic environment. But they are skills that you certainly can take with you, and being able to talk about them, having that skill of being able to translate for the person in front of you so they understand. Maybe the person in front of you has never gone to graduate school, doesn't have any association or understanding of academia at all. That skill of being able to translate it is really going to serve you well. And so looking at the skills and qualities that employers want, again, think about it in non-academic terms. So you've probably heard about being a good colleague, being able to collaborate on research, et cetera. That is ability to work in a team. You might hear that phrase more in industry. It's the same thing. It's the same skill set. Ability to do research. Those are problem-solving skills. Publications, your thesis, grant proposal writing, written communication skills. Some of these are exactly the same, like strong work ethic is strong work ethic, right? Presentations within the discipline, teaching, verbal communication skills. So you can see that there are a lot of things, some of them are exactly the same, and then others you just got to translate a little bit to the industry speak, what we'd more often, how we refer to things in industry and maybe a corporate environment, et cetera, outside of academia. Oops, I'm not sure what happened to that slide. Oh, there it is. Okay, good. So before you even begin to write that resume, first of all, it's a lot of looking at those jobs and looking at the job descriptions. And so get the advertisement of the job that you are interested in. And you can even do this now, even if you're not really on the job market yet. Find a job of interest that maybe you could see yourself being very interested in upon graduation. Find a job. Carefully read the advertisement for those qualifications. I personally like to highlight or underline or circle some key words or skill sets that they're looking for, just to kind of help myself to really pay attention and focus on those particular qualifications. Then the other piece that's helpful, again, knowing your audience, is doing some research on the company. You could have two biotech companies, so same industry, but the company culture, what they look for, what they value in an employee could be very different. So what are some things, I'll throw this out to the group. Where are some places you could go to research the company or the organization? You can just shout them out because I don't think I can use the chat. Anybody want to take a stab at it? Where are some places you might go?
You might look on Glassdoor for people to talk about their experience with the company or the website.
It looked like somebody was talking, but maybe I'm having trouble in my audio. I apologize. So things like, if you go to a company's website, if you go to, there's usually a careers with us, careers, jobs, something like that page. And that's really the company's, not mission statement. They're branding themselves as an employer on that page. It's not just a job listing of positions that they might have open. It's really how they brand themselves as an employer. And so what's important to them, et cetera. And so that is where you might go to really understand things like, what are their, you could be applying to work in, I don't know, the accounting department, let's say. But it's also really important to you that they support sustainability practices within the organization, or that diversity is a really important value statement of theirs. And so this is where you would go on their company website, for example, to learn about who they are as an employer, what they stand for. They usually have some testimonials from current employees. They choose those very carefully. They don't just, ask anybody to put a video up there. They're choosing employees who really embody what it means to be an employee there, what employees should value about the company. And all of those things really give you some real great clues as to what, to understand better who your audience is in this case. You can also go to places like Glassdoor, LinkedIn. There are tons of resources out there to learn more about an organization. So once you've done a little bit of homework on the job itself, then you look back at your CV and you look at those credentials and experiences, and you say to yourself, what really, if you look at your highlighted or underlined job description, what stuff do I have on my CV right now that directly speaks to those qualifications, those skill sets? And highlight, underline on your CV, on your resume, or start eliminating things that are not going to be nearly as important. Also, don't forget about things, you might have a lot on that CV, but maybe there are some things you've intentionally left off because they're not directly relevant, but in academia, but they would be relevant for this particular job. And so don't forget about any positions, internships, assistantships that might not have been a part of your CV and that might be relevant, and make sure you add those in. Any fields of specialization, relevant coursework, not all coursework, but relevant coursework. And I would say relevant coursework that I wouldn't expect for you to have with your graduate degree. If you have a graduate degree in sociology, I don't expect to see intro to sociology on your relevant course list. That's obvious. You should have something like that. And then identify any of those items that really fit with the qualifications and expectations, and make sure that you're saying, this is a must-have. I got to keep this thing on this resume when I'm moving forward. And this really helps you to kind of form the basis of what that resume will look like. So how do you know if you've really hit the mark? Whether or not I have hit the right note of this particular resume for these employers. So I've come up with this 20-second resume challenge. You can make it 10-second, 30-second resume challenge if you'd like. And so what you want to do is you first share your resume with someone who doesn't maybe know you super well. So not your best friend, not a parent, anybody like that, but maybe an acquaintance in a class, a professor, your advisor, somebody like that. Don't tell them what you're about to do. You take the resume away after 20 seconds or 10 seconds or whatever you're looking for. Don't give them a paper cut. That's the key there. Don't rip it out of their hands. And ask them, what is it that you learned about me? What stood out to you? I've found that this is a really effective way to see if you've hit the right note. If they're talking about things that are not relevant, I was an equestrian champion or something like that. It's not relevant to the job that you're applying to the job you're applying to. Then it's time to go back to the drawing board. And maybe it's a matter of moving things up on the resume. Remember, to the high value real estate of the beach. Making sure that certain things stand out. Maybe you need to take some things off. Whatever it might be, you got to go back to the drawing board. The reason why you don't want them to know you very well, and you don't want to tell them what you're about to do, that you want them to look at it for 20 seconds and then you're going to take it away, is because you really want an authentic reading. And so an employer is not, if I say, here's a sheet of paper with some information on it, I'm going to take it away in 20 seconds and see what you've learned. I'm going to study that thing, right? I'm really going to try to remember everything. Whereas you want them to look at the resume as an employer might, skimming it, just looking it over, not trying hard to remember any particular thing, just looking for things that stand out to them. And so that's how you can kind of gauge whether or not you've hit that right message for your resume. So that's the 20-second resume challenge. You can kind of do it with a cover letter. It's not as effective, I don't think, but this will really help you to understand whether you've hit that right message. So here is a list of resources, and I'm not sure how we're doing this here, Stacy, but I am willing to share this PowerPoint. I expected to share the PowerPoint with anybody who came to the event today, and so you'll have all these hyperlinks if there's a way for us to get that to students. But here, these are also things that you can easily Google as well. Here's some great places to go to get some further assistance with all of these things, not just the resume, but in a lot of cases, just getting career advice or help with preparing to interview, help with preparing to network, that sort of thing. So first and foremost, the Liberal Arts Career Enrichment Network is a fabulous resource. I know that as far as I'm aware, some of the appointments are more for undergrads, but they also have a lot of resources available and can point you in the direction as well. But then there's also the Liberal Arts Career Resources for graduate students. And that's another place that is specifically dedicated for you to go to as graduate students. I mentioned Dr. Ades. Dr. Sarah Ades is the Associate Dean of Graduate Student Affairs over at the Graduate School. And she is more than willing to help students with anything they need. And I'm going to read you, I consulted with her earlier because I wanted to make sure that I got the description of her office correct for all of you. And so she wrote to tell me that her office is responsible for career and professional development programming on a university level for graduate students, assisting graduate students who encounter difficulties in their degree programs, working on policies related to the student experience, and advocating for the interests of graduate students on all levels. And so, and she's got a dedicated email address there for you, graduatestudentaffairs@psu.edu. I would highly encourage you to reach out to her office for any assistance that you might need. There's also LionLink, which if you're not familiar with LionLink, it's a really fabulous resource that the Penn State Alumni Association manages. I haven't looked recently, but there are several thousand folks in that database either way. And one thing that's really fantastic about this resource, I'm gonna talk about LinkedIn in a moment here, but LionLink is kind of like a LinkedIn, but even better in the sense that it's a database of alumni who are simply there to help you as a current Penn State student or as a fellow alum in whatever career questions that you might have. And so if you, for example, wanted to look up to see if there is someone who held a graduate degree, maybe a PhD in anthropology, and they were in an industry with that degree, they've gone into industry. We'll go with the theme of this presentation today. You want to go into industry, not into academia with that degree. Where are they? If a person exists in that database, they are solely there for you to reach out to them, ask them questions. That's the reason for them being in there. I know they want us to refrain from calling them coaches. They're not career counselors in any sense of the way, but they're there to be a mentor in that way with your career questions that you might have. And that is the only reason they're there. Whereas LinkedIn, people are on LinkedIn for a lot of reasons and a lot of times for their own, professional development, not there to necessarily answer questions from others. So it's really low hanging fruit. I would encourage you to go in. You can filter the thousands of people who are in the database based on a lot of different things. For example, what kind of degree they got, graduate degree, and what that degree might be in, where they work. There are also some things in there that you could check off if, for example, if you wanted to know a little bit more about going into this STEM industry, this STEM company, STEM related company. Is this company open to hiring diverse individuals, and do they nurture those diverse individuals? Diversity in STEM is something that needs a little work, we'll say. And so you may want to know, but you may not feel super comfortable asking an employer that. And so you can go in and there are check boxes for things like not ask me, but I know I have information. I have specific information about being LGBTQ in the workplace, race and ethnicity in the workplace. That person may not specifically or personally identify in that way themselves, but they have insider information that they can give you. And so it's a really very safe way to maybe ask some of those more sensitive questions that you have about the industry, the company, et cetera. And then of course you can ask them all kinds of questions about interviewing in the industry, resumes, et cetera. That's why they are there. And so when you go into the system and you find somebody you want to speak to, it's pretty self-explanatory. It takes you through the steps, what kinds of things, it tells you what they're knowledgeable about, and then gives you ways to actually connect with them. And schedule appointments with them, et cetera. So it's a really cool system. I'd highly recommend that you check it out. I can give you advice all day long about any industry, but why not talk directly to the folks who are connected to that industry or that company? And then there's this a LinkedIn alumni feature. And let me see if I can actually open this. Can somebody give me, when this opens here, can somebody give me a heads up? I never know when I switch to something else. Am I can't see or hear anybody, so I'm kind of blind here, but can you all see my LinkedIn profile now, or my LinkedIn page? Anybody? No, I'm seeing Trevor says no. Okay, I never know if I have to do that or not. All right, let me switch out here. You reshare. I think I have to reshare every time I switch out here. Okay, and there's the chat. Now the chat is back. That's awesome. Okay, now you should be able to see it, right? Okay, awesome. Thank you. So one of the really cool features of LinkedIn, I really don't refer students to LinkedIn to find jobs necessarily. That is a feature of LinkedIn. I really refer them to this for the networking perks. And so one of the really cool features that you may not be aware of, if I go to search for Penn State University, the school, not the Alumni Association, although Alumni Association, very cool, very, something to join. But if I go to Penn State University, we're loading very slowly. So here it is. Here's the Penn State LinkedIn page. If I go over here on the left-hand side to alumni, what it'll do is it's going to bring up all, I don't know what we're at now. Okay, 428,000 alumni who exist. And actually that does include some current students as well, who exist in this platform. And you can filter those folks by where they live, where they work. Move over here, what they do, what they studied, what they're skilled at, and how you're connected to them. And so let's say I wanted to learn more. One thing I forgot to do in the beginning here was ask everybody who was on this call. I should have asked you, but let's say political science and government. I want to find people who are who have specifically done something in that that area. And I could further, narrow it down by people who work for a company like Deloitte. And that gives me what, 30 something, 33 alumni. Now, if I move down here, you will see folks who studied at some point, studied political science, government, et cetera, and who also work currently at Deloitte. I think sometimes it could also mean that they maybe have worked at Deloitte, but who are connected to Deloitte in some way. Now, what I could choose to do is, and you can see a lot of them will have their graduation years here, so you can kind of at least guess a little bit as to how far into their career they might be. And so if I found somebody who, is doing something that really interests me, I want to learn more, I might reach out to that person. I might connect with Danielle here, and I would add a note. I'd always recommend that you add a note, and you don't get a lot of characters, but something like, I'm a Penn State, PhD studying political science, very interested in working for an organization like Deloitte. Noting that you are a Penn State student, and try to connect with Danielle. Once you've connected with her, you can go to her profile, send her a message, and communicate with her. And you might ask her all kinds of questions like, what is the hiring process like at Deloitte? We have similar backgrounds. We both have graduate degrees in political science, and you now work for Deloitte. What's important for me to talk about on my resume, regarding my education, or whatever it might be. There's a million questions you can ask somebody. These are insiders. They know exactly what the process is like. And maybe it's that you want to learn, more about, maybe there aren't many people at Deloitte who are doing what you want to do. They're in different areas of the company. They could still be a valuable resource for learning about company culture, putting you in touch with others who might have more specific, more closely aligned with your interests, that sort of thing. I could go on this, topic for days, to be very honest with you, but just know, we can work with you on etiquette and how you talk with, how you communicate with folks on LinkedIn and that sort of thing. But I just think it's a really fabulous resource. Even things like, let me clear what I've got here, clear all that out. Maybe I want to, find out what, if I select my major, my degree, and just see where people go, where's the list of companies where they might go to be hired, or where do people who study psychology, which I just selected, where do they work, but also go over here, what do they do? It doesn't just have to be in healthcare services. There are a lot of different directions I might go, maybe just to help me give me ideas about the directions I might want to go in industry or wherever else. So it's a really cool resource. I'd highly recommend checking it out. Okay, so let's keep going here. Just got a few more things that I want to make sure that I mention. Certainly your advisors, folks, your professors that you work with are folks that you should make sure, I think it can be hard sometimes. I understand that there are sometimes politics involved, or might be difficult to share with your advisor in graduate school that you're thinking going in industry versus academia. And that varies from department to department. It can be harder in others than in some. But I would encourage you to at least try to feel that out a little bit and see. There are a lot of departments, there are a lot of professors who work here on campus who don't have an exclusive career in academia and might be able to advise you or give you some feedback or even networking contacts outside. So don't forget about those folks either. If English is your second language, the English for Professional Purposes Intercultural Center is a fabulous resource. They understand, I do presentations in conjunction with them all the time, in fact. They understand professional documents like resumes, cover letters, things like interviewing, etc., and can also understand the barriers you might have with English as your second language, not being maybe familiar with the US job system, et cetera. So they're a fantastic resource to go to. Your departments or your college's alumni network, a lot of departments and colleges do have their own alumni networks that are really active, so seek those out as well. And then finally, professional associations. Professional associations are in place to really connect like-minded professionals. And so whether that's trainings, professional development, or just getting access to a list of other members that you might connect with, they can be really valuable. And I will tell you that for many professional associations, the yearly fees can be quite high, but a lot of them will have either new professional rates or student rates that you would be eligible for that severely cut the cost. So even if you don't join right now, maybe join right before you graduate so you can get that student rate and really get access to a wealth of professionals and advice, et cetera, networking opportunities. So how can we help at Career Services? There's a couple of things. First of all, I want you to know that we did start our virtual drop-in career counseling for the semester. Our hours are 11 to 3 Eastern Standard Time. And our drop-in service is a 10 or 15 minute appointment that you don't need an appointment ahead of time. You just drop in virtually in this case. And you can talk with one of our career services professionals about anything you want. So maybe it is that you're converting your CV to a resume or writing a resume for a position. We can review that resume for you if you'd like, but it's not reserved just for resume review. It is any question that you have. Maybe it's, I'm preparing to talk to my advisor about a shift to industry. How do I do that? What's the etiquette here? What might I talk about? Whatever question you have, any career related question whatsoever is appropriate for our drop-in service. Now, we might not be able to solve everything in 10 or 15 minutes, and we have other resources that I'm going to share with you in a moment here, but it's a great start to that conversation. So any career related concern, it is completely confidential. It does not leave career services. It does not get back even that you were there or you were using our service. So it's completely confidential. To access our virtual drop-in career counseling, you can log in through Nittany Lion Careers. Just Google Nittany Lion Careers and you'll find it pretty quickly. Everybody has an account. The first time that you log into your account, you might have to go through a couple pages that asks you things like what career, what industries are you interested in, that sort of thing. Just answer, don't answer. It's not crucial to access the service. But you'll log in through Nittany Lion Careers as a student, choose career counseling, and then join the virtual waiting room. That's how you will access our virtual drop-in service right now. We do not currently have drop-in physically in the building in person at the moment. So in-depth assistance. So if a 10 or 15-minute appointment is just not going to cut it, which a lot of times it doesn't for some of these bigger questions, we have individual counseling appointments. These are 30 and 60-minute sessions. Again, broad scope, any career related question that you have, you may need one session with us. You may need to meet with us every week for the rest of the semester or the rest of the year. That's completely fine. We can do that. But again, they are completely confidential. We do currently have some, as far as I'm aware, we do have some in-person career counseling. We're a little bit limited, but we do have some in-person career counseling appointments. And then we also have virtual career counseling appointments. Again, you schedule those through Nittany Lion Careers under the career counseling tab, I believe on the left-hand side. And then we also have our mock interview program. These are also 30 and 60-minute appointments. They are realistic in the sense that if you are working with a career counselor, your career counselor is not going to be doing the mock interview. We want somebody new so that it feels real. It feels like a real interview. We do have available in person, I believe, still in person mock interviews, but we have virtual and phone interviews. And that actually was pre-pandemic. Because a lot of, especially first round interviews are virtual and phone interviews. And so we created that specifically to mirror what you might actually experience. They are recorded, although I don't think the phone interviews are recorded, but the others are recorded. And so if you'd like to watch it later or share it with a professor or somebody else who might be knowledgeable and give you feedback, you can do that. To be honest with you, I have schedule on the Career Services website. I know you can access it through the Career Services website. I think we actually have switched that to Nittany Lion Careers now that I'm reading this. But either way, if you go to our website and look up mock interviews, it'll give you a step-by-step process for how you would go about scheduling your mock interview with us. I do want to emphasize, because again, not all students realize this, we have all of these services available for graduate students as well. We are, the folks who do our career counseling are well-versed on working with graduate students, how to help you through that process of finding a job with a graduate degree and advanced degree. And so we are not just, we tend to serve more undergraduates for sure, but we are not just here to serve undergraduate students. We are also here for you as graduate students. So all of these services are open to you as well. I would be kicking myself if I didn't mention this fantastic program that we have. This is a program that is the result of our collaboration with the graduate school and Dr. Adie's. And so it's called Accelerate to Industry. It is actually a program that was founded by North Carolina State University, as you can see at the bottom there. They've been incredibly successful with bringing in industry folks to do workshops, events, et cetera, and really help graduate students specifically connect with industry. So this is the first time we're doing it. We're starting out with a 4-workshop series. And I expect that especially as we get closer to doing more things in person, the hope is that this series will actually expand. But for now, it is set for late March and early April, somewhere in that neighborhood. As I said, it's a 4-workshop series. The tentative schedule, and I just got this from Dr. Adie's today. So tentatively, these are the topics that are going to be discussed. There's going to be one on career exploration, one for networking, informational interviews, and establishing an online presence. one about building an effective resume and cover letter, and then interviewing. The idea is that while they don't have all the details ironed out right now, the idea is that they bring in industry representatives to present some of these workshops. And it may be a mix of career services professionals, the graduate school professionals, and industry. But the idea is that we kind of bring you closer to industry as graduate students. So this is specifically designed for you. They are hoping to start advertising all of the details starting in mid-February. So keep your eyes and ears open for details about that event. It should be a pretty fantastic event. I'm excited that we're doing this for the first time. So that is all I had today. I'm going to stop sharing because for some reason that was screwing up whether I could see your chat here. So are there any questions at all for me about anything we talked about? I can go into any detail about, you know, translating that resume or translating that CV to a resume or services, anything like that.
So it sounds like Leslie probably won't be able to hear you, but if you put it in the chat now that she stopped sharing her screen, she should be able to see that. And as a reminder, I did put it in the chat, but I will be sharing Leslie's presentation.
You're very welcome. You're very welcome.
As soon as I get that, and we'll get it passed out to
I see that was a
everybody.
direct message to me, so nobody knows why I'm saying you're welcome. Somebody thank me for the presentation. And yes, I will share this presentation, so you'll have access to all of those links. No problem at all. I do encourage you to come see us at Career Services, though. Like I said, we serve graduate students. We do it very well, especially when it comes to helping graduate students understand going into industry. So please check us out. But if there are no other questions, I hope you have a wonderful day. I hope you don't have to drive anywhere. It's not so pleasant out there right now. Please feel free to contact us if you have any questions at all. And that's it. My colleagues will crack up. I think this is the first time in my life I've ever been done early in a presentation. I was really wanting to make sure I left time for questions, but those who know me know I like to talk. So this is probably a once in a lifetime experience.
Well, we thank you very much.
All right.
Leslie.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you. And
thank you, Stacey.
Yep. Thank you everyone
I'll
for joining us.
hold on until everybody leaves and to see if there's any other questions, but thank you all.
Right. You're welcome. Thank you everyone for joining us. And we will make sure to get that presentation out to you. Have a great day.